Say hi. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to my channel. Um, I hope y'all enjoyed that last um, um, live with the therapy channel. He is such a cool dude. I'm glad I met him, and we just did 50 Cent versus everybody because he going on everybody. But now my dog wanted to say hi, say hi, Dior, say hi, say hi. All right, let me put you down. All right, we about to get into my leg itch. Okay, we about to get back into our reading on the Trilateral Commission. And as you know, this is a secret society, but they put very high profile elites are in this organization, and most of them hold positions in the United States government. Oh, that was the part on the unions. Okay, so let's get into it. A national wage policy would be one element of effective planning for economic and social development carried out by economists and planners representing business and government. In a draft report, Industrial Policy and the International Economy, March 1979, the need for voluntary concentration consultation between government and industry is stressed. Non Japanese trilateralists are envious of the close and uncloseted business government partnership known as Japan Incorporated. I never knew that. I'm going to have to do some research on that. Giving Japan a competitive edge they resent. A sound industrial policy must recognize that the enterprise sector is the prime mover in the economy. Public policy can help to strengthen industry and facilitate the structural transformation of the economy. It can contain or weed out the economic and social measures that reduce the dynamicism of industry. Trialists would like to see a renewal of presidential executive branch authority, especially deference to its views on foreign policy and international economics. Congressional nation mindedness in the era of war order politics has been duly laminated by the Trilateral Commission. They blame patriarchal interests in Congress for crippling Carter's first energy program and encouraging trade protectionism. The grueling controversy over the Panama Canal Treaties, 1980, when this book was written, 2025, Trump and Panama. The grueling controversy over the Panama Canal Treaties, the pressure to recognize the Rhodesian International Settlement, and the heated debate over SALT II have all threatened the trilateral consensus, has expressed in towards a renovated international system, since domestic politics is inevitably more shaped by national than external priorities. The political process produces varying degrees of protectionism parochialism, which disregards the impact of national action on the outside world and shows little interest of requirements of interdependence. The democratic surge threatens the fabric of international relations by undermining the U.S. role as the global police, because the United States is the global police. A government which lacks authority and which is committed to substantial domestic programs will have little ability, short of cataclysmic crisis, to impose its people on the sacrifices which may be necessary to deal with foreign policy problems and defense. Hmm. Such as the draft and social welfare cutbacks. Public awareness and opposition put a brake on U.S. interventionism in the post-Vietnam era. Only strong government without strong opposition and oversight can effectively rule in the interest of international capitalism. For a quarter century, the United States was the hegemonic power in a system of world order. The manifestations of the democratic distemper, however, have already stimulated uncertainty among allies and could well stimulate eventualism among enemies. A decline in the governability of democracy at home means a decline in the influence of democracy abroad. Once again, the definition of democracy is clearly spelled out. The last century, a decline in governmental ability of democracy at home means a decline in the strength of imperialism abroad. On the whole, trialists seem to be aware of limitations and contradictions within the capitalist form of democracy, even though their actions may often speak otherwise. In the arenas for action, commissioners recommend that governments give the highest priority to establishing a minimum form of guaranteed substance for all citizens. In actuality, this is another form of welfare to business. Income assistance, always business to pay low, and subsistence wages to boost profits and cushions the high level of unemployment, which is healthy for capitalism. When unemployment is high, workers are preoccupied with the threat of loss of jobs. When there's little unemployment, workers are in a much better position from which to bargain for improved wages. That's a fact. Benefits and working conditions and have greater chance of moving on to more attractive jobs, safer and higher paying jobs. William Tabb discusses this point in his article, The Trilateral Imprint on Domestic Economics. The Governability Report observes the historical record indicates that democracy works best, indeed, that it may only work where there is gradual but relatively constant increase in the economic well-being of society. The dream of capitalism is to co-opt people with higher living standards without redistributing any wealth. That is a fact. Without without co-optation, widespread repression is the only guarantor of gross inequality. If ever there was a democratic success story, it was written by the Trilateral Society during the quarter century following World War II. when, when just such a period of relatively constant economic growth occurred, begins the conclusion of the crisis of democracy. Among the keys to the success were sustained and for some countries spectacular economic growth, widespread social and economic immoralization involving a lessening of class conflict and assimilation of substantial portions of the population to middle class values, attitudes, and consumption practices. Ooh. The elimination of poverty and redistribution of wealth and power are not part of the democratic success story. Consumption is class conflict did not give way to a classless society, but was masked by the so-called consumption community. As prize-winning historian Daniel Borstein describes in Fortune, this is 1967. A consumption community consists of people who have a feeling of shared well-being, shared risks, common interests, and common concerns that come from the consuming the same kinds of objects. As the advertisers of the nationally branded and nationally advertised products are constantly telling us by buying their products we were joining a special group, the Dodge Rebellion, the Pepsi generation, those who throw in their lot with Avis because it's only number two. Consumption community is non-ideological. No profession or faith, no credo or orthodox, no ritual is required to join a consumption community. Capitalists hope to circumvent political revolution with the Dodge Rebellion and Pepsi Revolution. The binding ritual is consumption. The goal is to strive for a higher standard of living. The public seen and known measure how people do live and how they should live. People not only pledge allegiance to brand names, they support the corporate system. Borstein continues, consumption community is democratic. This is the great American democracy of caste which so exacerbated the aristocrats of all older worlds. Consumption communities generally welcome people of all races, ancestry, occupations, and income levels, provided they have the price of admission. The boss and the worker both own Westinghouse washers. In reality, of course, there is no democracy of consumption. The boss and worker may both own a Westinghouse washer, but workers must sell their labor power to the boss. Class background, sex, and a host of other factors determine who is likely to have the price of admission to which consumption communities Borstein writes. The struggle for civil rights in the U.S. has been in a large part a struggle for the right to consume, a struggle to enlarge and complete the democracy of consumption. This is deep. I ain't never thought about this. Consumption, the have and the have nots. Wow. The continuing crisis of democracy reflects the failure of capitalism to deliver the goods to the mainstream as well as to blacks and other people who have remained marginalized, the myth of the white and black bourgeoisie notwithstanding. On the point, see example, White Myth of Black Economics. This was in The Nation, 1978. Hill points out that during the 1960s, the gap in black and white income was somewhat narrow, but has widened again since the early 70s. He cites that the important Bureau census finding that the income average of the Negro family with three wage earners is not significantly different from the family income of an average white family with one wage earner. U.S. News and World Report 1978 states that the 1976 black family income was 59% of the white family income. In 77, it had dropped to 57%. As to the rising black middle class, Hill observes the proportion of black families earning 24,000 and up has steadily declined in recent years, from 12% in 72 to 9% in 76. Meanwhile, the proportion of black families with income between 16,200 and 24,000 has remained constant to about 25%. U.S. News and World Report reveals that the same 31% of all blacks are poor compared with 8.9% of all whites. The 60s and 70s saw little affirmative action and much affirmative tokenism. Over the last decade, we have seen a decline in real wage and living standards. 1980, 2025. The game don't change for the people in the time. CNBC reports a cut of $3.50 a week from 72 to August 78. His nominal wages soared from $121.09 to $184.09, but measured in 1967 dollars, his real earnings after taxes shrank to $96 to 64 cents to $93.12. Construction workers far worse, down by 15% a week, and those in finance and real estate lost $7 in real earnings. The only workers who did better were those in transportation and public utilities. Over a 6-year period, their rates jumped by the grand sum of 40 cents a week. When the masses of people demand a decent livelihood, trilateralism would like it to suffice to say, let them eat symbolic democracy. And when people demand true democracy, trilateralism responds with let them vote for the consumer products of their choice in the pseudo democracy of consumption. Wow, wow. But the crisis of democracy reflects a struggle for much more than right to consume either corporate products or liberal democratic symbols. It reflects the desire of a growing sector of the population to translate freedom of speech into freedom of act. The ruling class tries to restrict the freedom of speech to freedom to burn off steam, to criticize and propose from a position of powerlessness. Damn. Just as it means to confine the hard-won right to vote to the freedom to choose between candidates who are variations one of the same thing. That is a that is a fact. The crisis of democracy reflects a struggle to assert democratic control over political, economic, and social system. Capitalist democracy does not guarantee universal rights to decent food, shelter, housing, employment, childcare, education, or health care. There are no rights guaranteeing control over the flow of labor and control over the work process itself. Why? Because these rights contradict the unequal distribution of wealth and power. Formal political democracies help legitimize corporate capitalism. Damn. This theme has been elaborated by contemporary writers such as Ralph Milbrand, The State and Capitalist Society, Marxism and Politics. Harvard disguises Harvard distinguishes between substantial democracy, the genuine participation of citizens in a process of political will formation, and formal democracy, which permits the state to gain diffuse mass hostility while avoiding mass participation. True political democracy cannot exist without economic democracy, and economic democracy cannot exist under capitalism. That is so true. Challenges and contradictions. The struggle continues. 1980, 2025. The ruling class is not omnipotent. Ruling elites preserve their rule through a mixture of accommodation and force. Trilateralists hope to strengthen the weapons for military and economic policing of the subversive citizens in upstart countries while improving the weapons of cooperation. There are two stereotypical views of how ruling elites generally react to progressive demands for change. Actually, both views, when taken together, approximate the truth. The first view holds that every reform is wrested by oppressed from a kicking and screaming ruling class which attempts everything in its power to suppress progressive forces. The second holds that the ruling class is present and clever and acts quickly, even preemptively, to diffuse revolutionary potential with convincing timely minimum concessions within a long-range strategy of cooperation. The fact is that the ruling class elites do kick and scream in the face of change, particularly those capitalists who are the most directly hurt. Rather, usually smaller, labor-intensive businesses with local or national rather than international markets even are more enlightened, and politically conscious elites try to manipulate or manage social change in their own self-interest through a combination of reform and repression. Like their chief economic instrument, the global corporation, the ruling class shares flexibility. Indeed, it depends on it. Brzezinski, he is a Harvard professor, but he also served under Nixon as chief of staff, I believe, but he was up there somewhere. But he was one of the who helped groom Obama, along with George Soros and Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger, Illuminati himself. Brzezinski made this point in 78. On the whole, my views are strategically consistent, tactically very fluid. I'm perfectly willing to change tactical positions because the world changes. Anybody who maintains that one has to be constant in one's views in every aspect is a jerk. What history teaches us, to use a phrase favored by trilateralists, is that ruling elites are deadly serious about seeing that any renovation of the international system is in their interest. They will use a very carrot and stick tactics to maintain political and economic control. That is a fact, domestically and internationally. Control techniques will be more vicious or less depending on a combination of factors involving the state of the economy and, more importantly, the state of popular opposition. The more threatening and persistent the moves to counter their plans and build alternative models, the more violent will their tactics of repression. That's a fact. Check out Trump. Huh. Mm-hmm. 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 If this were a world of infinite resources and unlimited economic growth, then the very best which the ruling class might concede to a substantial sector of population in the world. Aldous Huxley in A Brave New World, and it's a movie, The Brave New World. Y'all should check that out. There is, of course, no reason why the new totalitarianism should resemble the old government by clubs and firing squads by artificial famine. You heard that. Artificial famine. Famine created. Mass imprisonment. All planned. Mass deportation is not merely inhuman. Nobody cares much about that nowadays. It is demonstratively inefficient, and in an age of advanced technology, inefficiency is the sin against the Holy Ghost. A really efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves. Come on now, who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude. Damn, that is good. They love their servitude. To make them love it is the task assigned in present-day totalitarian states to the ministries of propaganda, newspaper editors, and school teachers. Oh my God! That these new totalitarianists do not resemble the old is largely contingent upon the nurturing of political apathy consumption community. As more advanced weapons are being produced for the police state, more advanced means of psychological control are being developed. Oh my God! These behavioral controls operate in a variety of ways, from the CIA drug testing program. Come on now. Come on. That's from the 60s. On unsuspecting human guinea pigs in the 60s to the proliferation of mind altering drugs, the LSD testing. God, you can't make this up. Behavior modification techniques, MK Ultra, Monarch Project. Oh my God. And brain operations on prisoners and mental patients. Oh, I'm gonna have to start on my mm, mm. On biological chemical warfare. Oh my God. To so-called job enrichment programs for motivating employees to a host of ventures in the realms of education, advertising, and military training. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm gonna end that right there. Damn. Damn, that was good. Damn, that was good. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, hit that like button.